what I think I'll do, guys, is we'll start. Thank you so much for your patience. Is Sod's law? It was worked perfectly in the practice, but anyway, we'll get going. So, we haven't got everyone. I'll keep trying to let people in, but thank you so much for joining us today. We've put together the series of expert sessions to support you through this unusual time. Obviously, we hope you find today's session and any others that you attend helpful as a mountaineering professional. I'd really like to thank Mike Nikwax for Nikwax for agreeing to deliver the session this morning. I've already run through a couple of housekeeping aspects. Nick, I've no idea what's on the screen at the minute. On your screen, can you let me know?
Yeah, so we're on today's session now.
Oh, you are? Okay, all right, thank you. So hopefully that's straightforward, and that's quite enough from me, and I'd like to hand over to Mike Vassar from Nikwax to start the session.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. If you could go on to the next slide, Nick. Brilliant. So when I was asked to do this, it was a case of, oh, excellent, I can talk about Nikwax. Then I realised that in half an hour, I could talk about not very much compared to what we are about. So what we've broken it down into today is really a brief look at the principles of cleaning and improving, why we do it and how we do it. And I'm sure most of you have at some point done some form of cleaning and reproofing. But then the other two parts of the webinar really will be looking slightly more free flow and guided by your own questions. What other things you can reproof? So to give you a bit more awareness of the broadness of our range of products. And then also as the tidy up at the end, there are some products that we do which are about sort of managing water, but not the simple repellency aspect that we're best known for. So we'll briefly touch on those as well. Okay, if you go on to the next slide, Nick. So why do we clean and improve? Really what we're trying to do is maintain the performance of two things really. The performance of the kit. So what we want it to do is protect the user from the elements and the external environment. Now that may be just keeping them dry. That may be ensuring that footwear, for example, is kept supportive. So for instance, if you've got a soggy leather boot, then you lose the ability of that boot to give your ankle support, etc. And in terms of the individual, generally what we're thinking about is we're trying to keep them dry and warm. Which is a fairly superficial way in terms of saying warm. What we're really saying is not too cold and not too hot. So it works both ways. Generally, our marketing is really about to lots of people. And what we tend to talk about is comfort. But obviously in more extreme situations, the level of comfort relates really to a level of safety, or even at the extreme measure, a level of survival. So for general runners on the street, for people walking the dogs, we're keeping them nice and warm and dry. For people who are going higher and higher up the mountains, then we're also keeping them insulated and keeping them away from hypothermia. So most technical fabrics have DWR as a key component of their construction. And that technology, those chemicals that have been used, have gradually changed over the last few years. We've seen a move away from PFCs, or perfluorinated chemicals. And that's because they, although they're very good at giving water repellency, they've now been found to be very persistent in the environment, and not just persisting, but also potentially toxic as well. So you may have seen in the press a lot of talk about moving away from long chain PFCs to shorter chain PFCs, etc. But generally, PFCs are not being used. The issue that has caused within the outdoor trade is that the replacements, which sometimes are referred to as C0 technology, are not as durable actually on the garment. So the DWR is not as D as it used to be, which is brilliant news for Nikwax, because it means in terms of aftercare, in terms of cleaning and reproofing, then we have more opportunity. But over the last 5 years, we've been approached by a lot of the bigger brands to help them get around that problem and manage expectations. So why does DWR fail? So I've broken it down into two bits really. Contamination, which is all sorts of other products in the environment, which are going to either physically mask your durable water repellency, the DWR coating, or they will actually get rid of it. So mud, dirt, obviously they will provide a mask over the top of the DWR. Detergents can have a double effect. If you wash in a standard DAS or whatever, then the residue left behind, even after serious rinsing, can provide a hydrophilic layer which will hang on to water. If you're using a biological detergent, the effect can be even worse, and actually the bond between the DWR and the fabric will be broken down. So it'll actually strip off the DWR. Smoke. Now, this used to be more of an issue before the smoking banning pub. So we used to find a lot of people bring stuff back to us at head office and say, "Oh, the DWRs are gone. What do I need to do? Because it's not actually that dirty." But it's just been hanging on a hook in the cloakroom in the pub, and there was enough smoke then to degrade that. Still a problem if you've got open fires, etc. as well. And then more recently, alcohol in terms of sanitizer. So, just as a quick demo here, we've got Derek. Derek's had quite a long life in the outdoor trade. He used to work for a store, and then he was bought out by Carrymore and worked in the showroom there for a while. And then he finally passed into my hands. At one point, my partner stole him and he went and worked in a hospital as a dummy, having blood taken, etc. Now he's had his arms amputated. He's slightly different, but we now use him in a lot of Nikwax training sessions. I try not to drop him, but sometimes that does happen. Let me stand up, it's probably a bit easier. I'll try and get you into the camera. If we spray a bit of water on here, courtesy of my very technical rain machine, we should be able to see the effects of some alcohol gel that I put on earlier today. So it's a bit of a problem at the moment with the obviously bigger use of alcohol gel. And we can see just an initial appearing there, I think. So that's essentially a pretty well-proof jacket, just with one little application by finger of the alcohol gel, and that shows you what exactly we don't want, which is the substance wetting out there. Okay, so that's the demo on the jacket there. Okay, thank you. So the state of that, you clean with the correct technical cleaner. Most of you, I'm sure, will know Tech Wash in the green cap bottle. And then you reproof your product if it's necessary with the correct proofing product. And we use the mantra green for cleaning, purple for proofing. We do have some blue products. I will talk about those towards the end. How do we achieve that? I've already mentioned that I should have mentioned, we don't use PFCs in our products, and we never have. What we use is an elastomer. The word elastomer is a contraction of the two terms elastic and polymer. And essentially what they do is they form a network around the individual fibers of whatever you're treating. And that network itself is water repellent, but it's also a stretchy network, if you like. So if you were to imagine my leg encased in a nice fishnet stocking, that would be a good model of how it works. You may not wish to imagine that. Don't worry, I'm not hiding anything at the table at the moment. That's a core difference between us and what was mostly used in terms of PFCs. The PFC proofing tended to be like a whole load of bristles on a brush or little soldiers standing up to attention. And for the PFC products to work, you generally had to apply very high temperatures, both in the textile mill and also when you try to reproof as well. One of the core aspects of our product is that you don't have to apply heat to make the product work. So you can tumble dry if you want to, if it's convenient for you to dry stuff in a tumble dryer, but it's not necessary to make it work. And nor do you have to apply heat by an iron to make it work. If you've got an older garment, so 10, 15 years old maybe, which has the remnants of some PFC, DOWR on it, you may get a benefit because it will essentially realign all of those molecules still. But the older the garment gets, the less you're likely to have that left over. So what we're trying to achieve, obviously, the end result is the water repellent, the beading that you can see on the right-hand side there. And that's not a super duper studio shot. That's my, I think, almost 35-year-old ultimate Peapod tent at the Keswick Mountain Festival about 2 years ago, where it rained in the Lake District. Strange that. So that's what we're trying to achieve in what we do. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. Here's a quick look at what you can do it on in terms of the other products we do. So the core products that most people know are obviously Tech Wash for cleaning and then TX Direct in its washing form for reproofing. But we do a range of other proofing products for other materials. So the first obvious one is that we do TX Direct and also in a spray-on version. Why do we do a spray-on version? There's a couple of reasons really. One is that some things that you want to reproof, you might not be able to get into the washing machine, or you may not have a washing machine available, even though you can do TX washing by hand in a bottle or a bath. But also the technical construction of some garments will give you a water repellent layer on the outside and a hydrophilic layer on the inside. And the idea being is that it will grab the sweat and excess moisture on the inside, spread it out over a broad surface area, and then allow that to evaporate through the outer water repellent layer. So it's keeping the water repellency on the outside, keeps the outside clear, keeps the gate open, if you like, for the moisture vapor to evaporate through, and the inner layer spreads it out over a broad surface area. So if you're very, very particular about the technical performance of your garment, then you may wish to use the spray-on. A lot of people will use a wash-in in any case through sheer convenience. Same differentiation for soft shell proofs. We do a spray-on version and a wash-in version. And I would say we probably sell a bit more spray-on for soft shell than we do actually for TX Direct, simply because people are a bit more aware of the construction of the way their soft shell garment is working. In addition to that, we also provide product for cotton or canvas-based fabrics, so polycotton trousers. We have seen a resurgence in the market over the last couple of years of particularly Scandinavian outerwear, which is based on cotton. Some people still prefer to wax it with a bar of wax and iron it in. Other people would much more happily apply cotton proof in a washing machine. And then we also have polar proof for stuff made of fleece. This is really good for things like hats and gloves. Tends to be less used now for fleece jackets because they've been knocked out by water repellent down items, which neatly takes us on to the next couple of products that we're showing there, Downwash Direct and Downproof. So this has been an increasing area for us over the last 5 years or so with the growth of water repellent down. So the old mantra sort of 20 years ago of thou shalt not get your down equipment wet because otherwise it doesn't work at all, has sort of been phased out as water repellent down came onto the market. Now we work in conjunction with some brands to provide within the down processing process to provide them with water repellent down. Other people do that as well. That prompted us to change the nature of our cleaning product for down. So originally we had a product called Down Wash. That's now been upgraded into Downwash Direct, and it's an oddity within our range in that it does cleaning, and it does a better good job of cleaning than the previous Downwash did, but it also leaves behind an element of reproofing as well. So you can maintain very much your water repellent down with continual washing by downwash direct. If it gets to the point where it needs topping up, then the old downproof can also leap into the fray for you as well. Okay, if we could go on to the next slide. So we mentioned obviously footwear, and once again we do a range of footwear products, which can be a little bit confusing for people. The first thing to note is we've got a green footwear cleaning gel for cleaning, obviously, does what it says on the bottle, and that's for all types of footwear. The only proviso being that if you've got really smelly footwear, then we do another one called Sandal and Sports Shoe Wash, which is better at getting rid of odours, but not very friendly to water repellency. But footwear cleaning gel is similar in function to tech wash in terms of fabric. So it will get rid of dirt without degrading any water repellency or tanning agents or conditioner that's in the footwear. Then along from there, you can see waterproofing wax for leather, which is a liquid version of our original Nikwax. So it's the white stuff in a bottle, easy to apply. You can do it onto wet footwear. Fabric and leather, Nubic and suede. There's a little bit of an overlap on these two, but they're for combination footwear where you've got several different materials. They're also available in a spray-on version as well. And again, you can apply those directly to wet footwear once they've been cleaned. The good thing about water-based products is that when you apply it to wet products, it will naturally concentrate on the soggiest areas of what you've applied it to. So the water will channel into the soggy areas. So by default, you get more proofing in the wettest areas where you need it more. Now, conditioner for leather always causes some confusion. It's a sort of double-hatted product. It does do a little bit of proofing, but its main function is to soften and nourish leather. So those of you who remember the old liquid Nikwax in the square tin, it's the water-based version of that. The benefit of this product is that because it proofs at the same time and it's water-based, it's much harder to over-condition or over-soften leather footwear or items. So tends to be used on two types of leather footwear, either brand new stuff that is needs a bit of softening to help the breaking in process, or on those trusty old leather boots that have been dried by the wood fire or the campfire or left on the radiator. Everybody knows we shouldn't do that, but everybody at some point ends up trying to rush the process through. Last year, when it was particularly hot, before we got to the rainy patch, we had quite a few inquiries from people who'd left the boots just in their car and they're sort of overcooked in the car. Not good for dogs and not good for leather boots either, hot cars. So that will nourish the leather a bit, give more lubrication as well as topping up the waterproofing. And then on the far right, the tube of wax is really the successor of our original Nikwax in a tin. It's very similar. It uses the same elastomer to provide that water repellency. The difference is compared to the original wax that it is water-based. And the good thing about it being water-based, as with the others, is that you can apply it directly onto wet footwear once you've cleaned it. It's also the odd one out on this line of products because you will get an immediate repellent effect. So clean your boot, put the wax on, and then you will see the water bead up straight away. You don't have to wait for it to dry out. And that does make it an ideal product for people who are either on expeditions or out for a long time and don't have the luxury of having the time or the place to dry out their footwear. Okay. Have we got any questions so far? Any of the stuff that we've very briefly run through? Okay, so I've got a question about how often to reproof. It depends on quite a few things. We did some work at Caerphilly on a series of challenge walks where basically we set up a boot cleaning station, cleaning and reproofing station at the end of the walk. There's quite a lot of people went out, on about 500 people came through. Most of them came through us to get the boots cleaned and reproofed. And what was very obvious was that if you reproof your boots, they stay in much better condition and they don't need reproofing so often afterwards or cleaning as much. So it was much harder to clean those boots that hadn't been taken care of. There are all sorts of different conditions that will degrade whatever water repellency or waterproofing treatment you put on there. There's the abrasion, there's the type of water that you're going through in terms of if you're going through peat bogs, the acidic nature of that water will attack the leather more and will attack the tanning agents more. So you need to top up reproofing more. It's very much a question of seeing when your boots start to wet out and then topping it up then. Generally, I don't reproof my boots every time I go out. I will clean them every time. If the water just sits there and soaks in and doesn't come off when I'm cleaning, then I will reproof as well. But I don't reproof every time I use my footwear. There was another question popped on there, which I think was about liquid conditioner on suede. Yes, you can. However, it will change the appearance of suede. Generally, suede will tend to be a lot more flexible in any case. It tends to be a thinner layer of material than a full grain leather. It will have some effect if it's really dry and horrible. It will. You would probably lose the appearance. It will darken down and may make the surface more glossy as well. So there's another question here on standard Gore-Tex outer shell, recommending the spray or washing. My personal preference, and I think that's borne out by probably mirrored by the amount of product we sell proportionately in the UK, is to use the washing. With the washing, you get a more even coverage, and also it's simply easier. As long as you can work a washing machine and know which button to press, then it's easier than standing there with your jacket on a coat hanger or on the clothesline, spraying the thing and then wiping up the dribbles, etc. However, it depends, as we mentioned before, on how much you want to mirror the original performance of the jacket. If it has a wicking liner inside, you may wish to use the spray. Polyester man-made fill garments, what we recommend for that. Clean with tech wash, and then depending on the outer fabric, you might use polar proof, you might use soft shell proof, but either will give you a benefit for both the interior of the interior filling, prima loft or anything like that, and also on the outer as well. Okay. So Nick, if we could move on to the next slide. So one item that was flagged up that Chris didn't know about is actually a product called rope proof, which does what it's on the bottle. So for those of you who don't know, this is a rope, long stringy thing. We've had this product around for quite a long time. There are obviously certain benefits to having a dry treated rope. Again, it's suffering from the same issues of PFCs being removed from the general process. It's relatively simple to use. The old-fashioned way of doing it was simply to dump it in a bucket with the product, leave it to soak and then rinse it out. We do now recommend putting it into the washing machine to wiggle it about a bit. The difference with this product is we do recommend leaving it in a bucket for about 2 hours. And that's because the nature of a kern mantle rope means that it's much harder for stuff to get into it. The longer time you leave it to soak, then the further it will penetrate into the rope. So that does obviously have just the fact that it doesn't get wet I appreciate that our climber on the fantastic photo doesn't look particularly wet anyway, but we did have limited access to stuff because of COVID-19 yesterday. It makes the rope easy to handle. It doesn't get wet. In harsher conditions, it's also going to reduce the likelihood that the rope is going to freeze, etc., etc. But it will also help, like footwear, it will help with the longevity of the rope, because a water repellent rope will also soak up less grit and dirt. And if that gets ingrained, either into the footwear or into the rope, that will have an abrasive action. So a soggy rope is more likely to soak up that abrasive grit, which can work away on the internal fibres. So that's rope proof. That's another product that we do in the range. We've had it for quite a while. We do tend to sell more rope proof in our export markets in Europe, simply because people are closer to mountains. There's a high proportion of people are doing stuff in the mountains where they're using ropes. But equally valid for you if you're climbing in the lakes and Scotland, where apparently it occasionally rains and people do get a bit damp. If we could have the next slide, Nick. Thank you. So there are actually two products here. I don't have a picture of one of them because it was a bit new. So I'll flash it in front of you. Tent and Gear Solar Wash and Tent and Gear Solar Proof. So imagine Tech Wash for tents. We also have my very lightweight tent for mountain marathons here. I need to lose a bit of weight though, so I won't fit in it again. The idea behind these two is it is cleaning and reproofing with an added bonus. So we're going on to that little extra bit that we do beyond the waterproofing, and it provides extra protection against UV rays, so the sun essentially. So think of them as sunscreen for tents or for rucksacks or for your cycle pannier bags or motorcycle pannier bags or for camera bags or any type of stuff that is going to be out in the sunshine but where you're not so worried about breathability. So these products are a bit more ham-fisted in terms of providing the water repellency. Why do we do two with solar stuff in? Well, we had quite a few. We used to do just Tent and Gear Solar Proof and recommended cleaning with Tech Wash. But we had quite a lot of people saying, I don't go camping in the rain. This is more to do with family campers rather than obviously adventurous mountain leaders who are more likely to get soggy. But there is a market for people who are going to clean their tents, but they're actually not worried about topping up the water repellency. So in this effect, you can, with this product, Tent and Gear Solar Wash, the one in the green bottle, as the cleaning element, then you can simply spray it on, rinse it off, and that will leave behind, no dirt, but it will leave behind some sunscreen. Now, there are tests on fabric under, I would say, laboratory conditions, but it's actually outside the laboratory, on the laboratory roof, I think, where these were done. We reckon that the application of that UV proof will double the life of the fabric. And what does it do? What's the physical effect? What's the effect that you can actually see? What's the benefit you can actually see? It won't prevent the fabric from actually fading. So it won't prevent the dye stuffs from actually going through their chemical reactions. A particular problem with red tents or orange tents that tend to fade because the red dye is less stable. What it will do, though, is ensure that the tear strength of the fabric is retained. So what you will find is that the fabric will become less brittle. We tested this, sort of some of the reps at home with a few cheap umbrellas, spraying different panels, and it was very noticeable that the untreated panels went very brittle, and even just the very act of folding the umbrella would lead to the panel disintegrating, unfortunately. Whereas those that had been treated both with either just with solar proof or with solar wash and solar proof, or with both of them, lasted much longer, as well as retaining the water repellency factor. Let's just see if we've got any other questions come through. Okay, let's delaying the questions a bit longer. So on to the final slide then. So I mentioned there was some stuff which is pretty much opposite of what we normally do. So we have a range, what we actually call the sweat proofing range. Now, my apologies, but these are the pictures of the original labels. We do have some sexier labels at the moment, which will be passed on to the whole range. So that's the Base Fresh, which is on the left-hand side. So I mentioned that we had some blue lidded products in the range, and this is one of them. So Base Fresh is a technical conditioner. Forget everything I've said about water repellency. We do exactly the opposite with these products. So Base Fresh is like something you add alongside your normal household detergent. So for your base layers or your socks or your underpants or anything else that you are not worried about the water repellency in terms of shedding water, but you would like it to wick. So applying this in the washing machine instead of your standard conditioner like Comfort or Lenore will do two things. It will enhance the wicking ability of the fabric. So it will spread the water out over a broader surface area to enable it to progress through the system and evaporate quicker. And it will also deodorize. Now, I have to admit that I was a bit skeptical about this. When I came back to Nikwax for my second tour of duty about 5 years ago, I hadn't used these products. And I thought, yeah, right. I've heard so many tales of this will get rid of the smelly heli problem that I do have, or did have. But it's quite impressive. The substance inside is called geraniol or geraniol, depending on which way you like to pronounce it. It's originally derived from geraniums. It's used quite extensively in a lot of cosmetics as a fragrance, but also as an antimicrobial substance as well. So it not only deodorizes and gets rid of those sweaty armpits, but it also prevents build-up of odors moving forward. It is one of the most taken home products from Nikwax in terms of the free stuff that our staff take home. And that's because it gets used across a broad range of products. People use it in their standard laundry. It's particularly good if you're somebody who does a lot of traveling. Not only can you eke out another couple of days from your socks and underwear, but also when you packed everything at the end of your 2-week long trip, then when you do open your suitcase, it doesn't smell quite so bad either. You don't get that lovely ammonia hit that some of us may be used to. So that's a deodorizer and a wicking enhancer in one. And you simply add that into your washing machine with your standard detergent instead of your other normal conditioner. The other two, Base Wash and Wool Wash, are essentially a cleaner combined with Base Fresh. Base Wash is for synthetic base layers, so that could be your Helly Hansons or your whatever else you're wearing, and Wool Wash is for merino base layers. Relatively simple once you get the concept that you're not going to protect any water repellency, you're going to do the opposite. The footwear equivalent of that is now called Sandal and Sports Shoe Wash. They used to be called Sandal Wash, but what we found, quite a lot of people were using it on things like climbing shoes and trainers. Some people, including me, will also use it on elements of the standard footwear. So it's quite good to use on footbeds. If you can take the footbed out of your waterproof, breathable footwear, because you're getting a bit of a smell in there, then you can use that just on the footbed to get rid of that odour and also enhance the wicking, because you want your footbed to wick quite well. Okay. Let's have a look.
Mike, I'm just slightly conscious of the time.
Yeah, I was just looking at the clock as well, actually.
Yeah, we've got just over 10 minutes. So would you like to just sort of wrap up with the product information and then we can take questions? Does that sound okay? Yeah,
that's cool. So a pretty brief run through, I know, guys. I hope there wasn't too much stuff that you already knew. I hope you got something out of it. So we looked at briefly cleaning and reproofing, what else we do in the range, and then the other things we do which are off to one side in terms of the sweat proofing range. So if you've got any questions, send them across. I can see I've got one about would that work on a cotton canvas tent? So I'm assuming that's about solar wash, and the answer to that is yes. And then for reproofing, though, we would recommend cotton proof. Okay, so if there's no more questions I can see coming through, just a little bit of an update on the current situation with regard to COVID-19. So there is a link to the website on the final slide. If you want to find out more information about what we're doing in terms of helping the situation with medical and surgical PPE, then it's being updated every couple of days. So currently, Nick has been working alongside the guys in our development lab and alongside with people in the NHS trusts and laboratories to look at ways of being able to reuse medical PPE, so gowns and masks. So the problem with most PPE is it's just single use. It's designed to be single use. It's not designed to be washed and reused. Nick's been looking at ways of making sure that we can clean and reproof that sort of product. An essential part of that sort of product, one of the properties is the fluid repellency, so i.e. water repellency, to prevent both the wicking of microbes and viruses through the fabric and also trying to make it shed it. So he's been looking at ways of preserving what are relatively fragile garments and masks by washing them at lower temperatures. So he's looking at the whole process rather than just providing a bottle of glue that I'll do for us. But please bear in mind that we are working on that at the moment to help out.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? If you, rather than tap in the chat, if you wanted to raise your hand and you put your video on, then we can take questions that way, if that helps anybody. Just going to scroll through the images that I can see to check on that.
I have a question. Will there come a point where a fabric just cannot be revived, as in you just can't get it to do its thing anymore, and you may as well, because that's kind of what it feels like some products get to?
Inevitably, yes. I think there will be a point where things just become so literally threadbare, or where the laminate has broken down, where no amount of cleaning and reproofing is actually going to revive them. I think the main point to make is that if you keep something cleaned and reproofed initially, then that point where it breaks down completely will be further away than if you had just not done anything to it. But inevitably, most stuff will break down eventually.
Just a quick question as well on the rope proof stuff you do. Does that also work for other nylon products like slings and harnesses?
Yes. So, I mean, when I've used mine, which has been a few years since I last did it, actually, I must be honest, but I always used to sling in my slings, as it were, pardon the pun, as well. And I also used to do my harness as well.
One other question from me. The solar proof product you do, does that?
Yeah.
Have you heard of people doing that with paragliders?
There was some discussion about 10 years ago when we first launched it. There was no conclusion at that point reached, from what I understand. So I think one of the issues was that people were within the paragliding associations were unwilling to recommend it unless the manufacturers had done the collapse and stall tests on the various wings. I think people have used it, but I don't know. It is an area that I am intending to look at in the future. I was actually meant to be learning to paraglide this week in Spain, but that's unfortunately been delayed. And I was intending to find out some more stuff about that. Certainly, I know that people have used it on things where their life doesn't depend on it, into things like kite, which obviously similar materials and similar performance.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Okay. We appreciate that some of you may have questions that occur to you when the meeting has finished, and Mike has kindly said that he is happy to receive questions, or you can send them to us, and once we've edited the webinar and it is shared, we can have a sort of FAQ section if that's helpful for people. So I appreciate you might have some questions that emerge later. Mike, any other comments from you, I think, at this stage?
No, just thanks for listening, guys. And as Chris said, if you've got any other questions, then just forward through them either direct to us or through Chris, and we'll try and help out.
Obviously, well, not obviously, I can't see that at the moment, but I'm presuming, is the thank you slide up?
It was, yeah, there we go.
Okay, and so yeah, huge thanks to Mike, especially because as he's explained, and you may be aware anyway, Nikwax are really busy supporting the larger sort of COVID-19 issue at the moment, which is really good news. We will be asking for feedback. Obviously, we've certainly got some feedback for ourselves from today's session that we will do our best to fix imminently. But please send that in to us, and we'll be sending an email to capture your thoughts and feelings about this. And finally, just a reminder that next week we have Johnny Schofield from DMM, and he will be talking about the technical aspects and testing of strength testing for climbing hardware. So we do hope that you will join us next week for that session, same time, 10:30, and we will send you information about further sessions. The one after that is actually going to be about legal aspects and insurance during COVID-19. That will be hopefully helpful for you, etc. And so watch out for your emails. I think we'll just check in case there are any final questions, and if not, then we'll fairly quickly end the meeting. Any final questions from anyone?
No, but thank you very much.
Okay, well, thanks, guys. We're all learning, and we look forward to huge thanks to Mike again and Nikwax, and we look forward to seeing you all at some future sessions. Many thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks very much, guys.